Hello everybody. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Samantha Leighanne and I talk about books. Today we are going to be going through my December wrap up. December was kind of a crazy month for me because I work retail, and as anybody who works retail knows, December is the craziest time of year. But somehow, in spite of all of those things, I read 11 books this month. I know, I'm as shocked as you are. I read 11 books. This is the most books that I've read in a month the entire year. Maybe of all time, I don't know, but yeah, so I was pretty excited about that. So since we have 11 books to talk about, we're just gonna jump right into it. First thing that I actually listened to this month was Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. Absolutely loved it. It is a great classic novel. If you are a fan of the musical or you are a fan of the movie that has Gerard Butler in it, like I am, not even gonna lie about it, then you should most definitely read this book if you have not already. I was very surprised at the level of similarity that there is between the musical / movie and the book. They did a very, very good job, I feel, translating it into, that musical. It is by far one of my favorite classic books that I have ever read. It did make my top 6 in 2016. I'll link that video down below if you so desire to watch it. But I could not recommend it highly enough, especially if you're trying to get more classics in your life. You should definitely pick this one up. It is a fairly quick read, or listen if you so choose to listen to it on audio. The narrator who did it, I can't remember his name, but he was excellent. So I highly recommend the audiobook version as well. So 4.5 out of 5 stars from me. Good stuff. Next book on this list is Hollow City, book 2 in the Miss Peregrine's trilogy by Ransom Riggs. It's time for an unpopular opinion. Y'all, I was not a huge fan of this book. I liked the first one, I really did. When we got into this one, the first one I thought needed a little bit more character development, but I was like, you know what? This is the first book in the trilogy. It is very promising. I got into this thinking, okay, we're going to see some more character development, like it's going to be all good. And we did see some character development. Don't get me wrong, but there were more things in this that I didn't like than I did. There were a couple of plot devices where it was like, fucking really, dude? Are you really gonna do that? Convenient plot device is convenient. And it's just like, obviously I know that you have to use those things sometimes, but it was like, really? The premise of this book is so creative that you couldn't get any more creative than that? You really couldn't? Come on. And then there was another moment. I'm not gonna go into too much detail, but it's this really intense scene between Emma and Jacob. Those of you that have read the book are probably going to know the one that I'm talking about, where there is this moment between them. I can't figure out the best way to talk about it without spoiling it, but just know that there is an insta-love factor in this that made me want to throw the book across the room. I don't really want to throw books very often, but it was like, stop it. Stop it right now. There is no reason to include this. You are rushing things. I hate you for doing this to me. Obviously, I have very strong feelings about it. For those of you that really love this series, I'm sorry, but I just couldn't get down with it. I wanted there to be a little bit more development before we got to that point in the relationship, and I just did not appreciate that there wasn't more development. I mean, you have a whole other book that you could have developed it into, but you chose not to. That was the biggest problem that I had with this. I did push on to read the third, which I will talk about later in this video because I did finish that this month. This ended up getting a 3 out of 5 for me, and honestly, that was being very generous. I was really disappointed because I really wanted to love this book and this trilogy, but it just, all the hype that surrounded it, it seemed like it was going to be awesome, and then it just really wasn't for me, so sorry. The next 2 books I read was The Lightning Thief and Sea of Monsters. Both of those are books 1 and 2 in Percy Jackson and the Olympians. 4 out of 5 for both. Absolutely loved those 2. Very quick reads. They're just really fun. I don't know if this is considered young adult or middle grade. I'm not very good at the distinction between the two, but I really enjoyed those. Like I said, just really fun, really quick reads, and those were some of my favorite books that I have read this whole year, and those actually did make it into my top 6 in 2016. So again, linked below. This is actually a series that I decided to pick up because of BookTube, and I'm really glad that I decided to do that. I see why there was so much hype around it. It's a good story. Definitely highly recommend, especially if you love mythology, and even if you don't, it's fun. You should read it. You just should. The next book that I read was actually one of my favorite books that I read this entire year, and that was Under the Udala Trees by Chinelo Okparanta. I'm not gonna go into a lot of detail because I have a really hard time articulating the way that I feel about this book. This is about a young girl who lives through the Nigerian Civil War and some of the things that happened during that time period, during which she discovers that she is a lesbian and kind of the things that happened to her as a result. For me, being a white woman, a white heterosexual woman, this was one of the first books that I read that included a lesbian main character and a person of color as the main character. And so it was very impactful for me, and I think I'm still kind of processing the things that happened in this book and the feelings that the author was trying to convey. It is an excellent book. If you are trying to read more diversely, I highly recommend it. I did listen to this on audio, and the person who narrated did an excellent job. There is a lot of Nigerian culture that is represented. There is a lot of their language and their folklore, which was very valuable to me as someone who knows nothing about that culture. But I highly recommend this. This got like a 4.75 out of 5 for me, and the only reason that I took away that 1/4 star was because of the epilogue that was included. I kind of felt like it didn't necessarily need to be there. The way that the last chapter ended, I felt like that was a good stopping point. It did not detract like a ton from, you know, my feelings about the book. Don't get me wrong, but it's just, I kind of felt like it was unnecessary, that we could have just left off there and been good to go. But I cannot recommend this book enough. I highly recommend that you pick it up. Even if you don't want to read more diversely, you should just pick it up anyway. You really should. Next thing that, again, I listened to was Breakfast at Tiffany's by Truman Capote. This is actually considered a novella. It was a really short listen. It was like 3.5, like maybe almost 4 hours. I've never seen the movie. And it was narrated by Michael C. Hall, who was Dexter in the Dexter series, for those of you that have seen that. He did a wonderful job narrating it. It wasn't the best thing that I've listened to or the best thing that I've read, but it definitely wasn't bad. I liked the character of Holly Golightly. I gave this one 3 out of 5. It's not like super high on my list, but it's not super low either. I was kind of like, it was middling for me, I guess you can say. So that's how I felt about it, 3 out of 5. Next thing that once again I listened to was Animal Farm by George Orwell. I had read this before. This was a reread for me, but it was just something quick that I could listen to. It was narrated by the same person who narrated Phantom of the Opera, and I think his name is Ralph Cossum, something along those lines. But again, he did an excellent job. I see why they make us read that book in high school. I see a lot of the things about it. But I gave it a 5 out of 5 because, again, I've read it before, and I kind of feel like it's one of those things that everybody needs to read at once in their life. The next thing that I read this month was The Color Purple by Alice Walker. This is another book that I have a really hard time articulating my feelings about. I saw this movie years and years ago, and I really enjoyed the movie. Reading the book was a completely different experience. It is written in letter format from the main character, Celie. Either she is writing to God or she is writing to her sister. And then at some point, we start getting letters from her sister to Celie. This was also one of the best books that I read this year for a lot of different reasons. A lot of the same reasons that Under the Udala Trees was also one of my favorite books that I read this year. I finished this book, and again, I was sitting on the couch. My husband's playing Xbox, and I'm sitting on the couch like sobbing, okay? I haven't had a book make me cry like that in a really long time, and I'm still having trouble articulating, and I still get emotional whenever I talk about this. It was, y'all, I can't even talk about it. I'm sorry, like, I'm not this person. I don't get overly emotional about almost anything at all, but y'all, this book fucked me up. It fucked me up for so many different reasons. If you haven't read this book, you need to. I don't know. It's just so fucking phenomenal. So phenomenal. I know that I'm gonna reread this multiple times. Just read this book. I mean, that's all I can really say. Just read this book. It is heart-wrenching and just so many things that I cannot put into words. I can't put it into words. I'm trying and I'm failing super hard. I'm not the most articulate person as it is, and this just takes every bit of that completely out of me because it's hard to talk about it because you feel it so deeply. Hopefully you understand what I'm trying to say. You probably don't, so sorry for that. But if you haven't read it, like, I need you to read this. I need somebody else to read this so that they can talk about it with me, because I don't know anybody else that's read it. And I need somebody to read this book and discuss it with me. If you have read this book, get at me on Twitter, comment, like, send me an email, do something, because I have so many things that I need to talk about, and I don't have anybody to talk about it with. Okay, now that we're done with that part, let's move on to other things. Next book was The Titan's Curse, number 3 in the Percy Jackson and the Olympians series. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because you know how I felt about the first two, and that is essentially how I feel about this one. 4 out of 5. Read it thing. Next thing I listened to on audio, and that is The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. I have read this, I think, at least 2 times before, but it has been so long since I've read it. Audible had a sale and they had this book, and it was read by Nick Offerman. So I had the chance to have a book read to me by Ron Swanson, and I jumped at the chance. But really, he was an absolutely wonderful narrator, and I would recommend this version of this audiobook. This did kind of fulfill one of the things that I was trying to do, read more classic. And I think, again, as I have started reading more diversely and my tastes have started changing as a reader, I did look at this a little bit differently than I did whenever I was in high school. But overall, it was a good read. If you haven't read this since you were young like myself, I recommend picking it back up. It definitely is going to change your perspective a little bit, especially considering the things that have been happening in the last couple of years, politically and otherwise. It's just, it's interesting. I recommend it. I rated it 4 out of 5. And the last book that I read was Library of Souls, book 3 in Miss Peregrine's trilogy. Same unpopular opinion. I tried to read this book for a whole fucking month. I usually can read a book like that. This book took me an entire month to read. An entire month. I struggled my way through this. And really, I think after the second one disappointed me as much as it did, I think the only reason that I read this was just because obviously I bought the book and I wanted to finish the trilogy, and I kept hoping that maybe the second book was just like sophomore slump, or you know, whatever they call it, like that middle book syndrome where it's just like, what the fuck. Also, again, at the very beginning of this book, convenient plot device is convenient. And I'm just gonna go ahead and throw this out here, and I'm not gonna talk about the context, because if you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. Comic-Con, really? That's just too fucking easy. That is too fucking easy. That is what I'm talking about. Convenient plot device is convenient. Like, really? I'm sorry. That's probably me being overly critical, to be completely honest with you. It was just like, why you do this? Why you do this? Again, I wanted to love this. I gave it 3 out of 5, and that was me being generous. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to everybody that loves this trilogy, but I just could not get down. And it sucks because I wanted to love it. I wanted to love it. This was easily one of the most disappointing things that I have read the entire year, which sucks. And I didn't read very much disappointing stuff, and I did not think that this was going to be disappointing, but it was. So those are the 11 books that I read this month. Hopefully I'm going to keep up this pace. If you have seen my 2017 reading goals video, you know that I am hoping to average at least 6 a month. So if I can keep up the pace that I kept this month, then I would say that I'm going to be in pretty good shape, and I will easily surpass my goal. Thank you so much for watching this today. Comment down below and let me know what you think about any or all of these books, especially if you've read The Color Purple. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. I will see you guys next time. That will probably be my year-end wrap-up video, so I look forward to seeing you then. And remember, give this video a thumbs up if you like it, and subscribe if you have not already. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!